Dad, look at me. Focus. Mom's been gone 6 months and you're forgetting things again. Dangerous mistakes again. This isn't up for discussion. This is what Mom would have wanted. And you know it. I started to say, Helen never. She lifted her hand. Not angry. Worse. Like she was stopping a child from interrupting adults. Please don't argue. We've been through this already. You don't remember, but we do. I tried again. I remember everything. Dad, stop. You're doing it right now. The confusion. Can you just listen for once? Even my attempt to speak was being treated like a symptom, so I went silent. Not because I agreed, because I realized any response would make me the problem, the difficult one, the confused old man who argues when people try to help. What would you have done? Call her out on the spot? Or stay quiet so you don't prove her right? And that's when I remembered everything Helen warned me about before she died. I wasn't just losing my mind. According to my daughter, I had already lost it, and she was treating me like a confused child. She called it care. I called it humiliation. 8 weeks ago, Jennifer stood in my kitchen where Helen used to make coffee and spoke to me like I was senile. Maybe I was losing my mind. Maybe the grief really had broken something fundamental inside me. Maybe Jennifer was right to treat me like I couldn't make basic decisions anymore. She said I was dangerous to myself, forgetting conversations we'd never had, making poor choices that worried her. But the worst part wasn't what she said. It was how she said it. The competency hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning in October, the kind of legal proceeding where families destroy each other under harsh fluorescent lights. Superior Court. In the matter of my mental capacity, I wasn't a person anymore. I was case Nacroy CV 2024-47, a file folder, a problem to be adjudicated. Should I speak up and look unstable or stay quiet and disappear completely? I sat where they put people whose own children questioned their minds, the defendant's table in a room that smelled like old coffee and broken dignity. I could feel eyes on me from every direction, not helping, just watching, judging whether I belonged there. In courtrooms like this, you're not someone's beloved father anymore. You're the confused old man who can't be trusted, the burden nobody wants to inherit. If this is happening to you right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about. That moment when the person you raised, loved unconditionally, sacrificed everything stands before complete strangers and asks them to take away your fundamental right to decide your own life. Should I have been grateful she cared enough to get involved? Or was I right to feel like my dignity was being auctioned off to the highest bidder? I could feel strangers deciding my worth with their eyes. Jennifer wore her Navy business suit, the one Helen had helped her pick out for job interviews after college graduation. Professional, concerned, competent. She looked like the responsible adult dealing with an aging parent's decline. You don't spend 30 years as a mechanical engineer without learning how people prepare presentations, how they rehearse expressions until they look natural. The judge called court to order with the calm authority of someone who'd watched this heartbreaking family drama play out hundreds of times. This is a petition for conservatorship and guardianship filed by the petitioner against her father. The court will determine his capacity to manage his personal care and financial affairs independently. Jennifer's lawyer stood first. Young man in an expensive suit that was probably paid for with money that wasn't really his. Your Honor, my client's father has experienced significant cognitive decline since the tragic death of his beloved wife. The evidence will show he can no longer safely live independently or manage his substantial financial assets without supervision. My lawyer stood slowly. Margaret. I'd chosen her because she specialized in fighting these cases. She was quiet, methodical, and had spent 20 years watching families destroy each other over money disguised as love. Your Honor, this man is grieving the loss of his life partner, not suffering from incompetence. This petition is motivated by the petitioner's financial desperation, not genuine concern for his welfare. That's when the serious doubt crept in. What if they were right? What if I really was declining and everyone could see it except me? But then I thought about 3 weeks earlier. The bank. The moment that changed everything. I didn't react immediately after that kitchen conversation. I watched. I remembered every interaction with fresh, painful perspective. Everything since the funeral felt different now. Every visit that had seemed like a daughter checking on her grieving father now looked like systematic preparation for this moment. The real humiliation had started 3 weeks earlier at First National Bank. I'd gone to update my account after Helen's death. Normal paperwork. The kind of thing adults handle routinely. Jennifer had insisted on accompanying me. For emotional support, Dad. You shouldn't handle financial matters alone right now in your state. At the bank, she positioned herself beside me while I spoke with the manager about routine account changes. My wife passed away 6 months ago. I need to update the account information and remove her name. Before I could continue explaining the simple procedure, Jennifer interrupted with that smile. The one that said she was being patient with a difficult person. What my father's trying to say is that he's been having significant trouble managing basic things since Mom died. He gets confused very easily now. Sometimes he completely forgets important conversations we've had just hours before. She said it like she was translating for someone who couldn't speak properly. The bank manager immediately shifted his attention to Jennifer, looking at me with that particular expression, the one people reserve for children and the mentally impaired. Sir, do you understand what your daughter is explaining about your condition? I understand perfectly. I'm grieving the loss of my wife, not suffering from cognitive impairment. Jennifer's laugh came out sharp. Dad, see, this is exactly what I mean. You think everyone's against you lately. We're trying to help, and you're being paranoid again. She didn't even lower her voice, like I wasn't worth the courtesy. My face burned. I could feel heat creeping up my neck. I didn't know where to put my hands. I wanted to sink into that chair and disappear. I folded my hands so no one would see them shaking. She turned to the manager like I was invisible, speaking about me in third person while I sat right there listening to every word. He's been like this since the funeral, unfortunately. Paranoid, defensive when anyone tries to help. The doctor says it's unfortunately normal for his age, but we're extremely concerned about his decision-making capacity. The manager nodded sympathetically. At Jennifer, not at me, like I was a problem they were solving together. We see this often with elderly clients. Family support is absolutely crucial during these difficult transitions. Then he asked her, "What documents will you need for managing his accounts?" Her, not me. I was sitting right there, but they were discussing my finances like I was already incompetent, like I wasn't even in the room. I sat there in stunned silence while they discussed my mental state as if I were a confused child who couldn't understand adult conversation. I was present, but erased, alive but irrelevant. Should I have stood up and walked out, demanded they speak to me directly, or would that have just confirmed everything Jennifer was telling him about my episodes? That's when I realized what was actually happening. Jennifer wasn't worried about my emotional health. She was systematically preparing everyone in my life to see me as incompetent. Since then, every conversation felt like a performance designed to demonstrate my diminished capacity. Dad, remember we talked about this yesterday? You really don't remember? That's okay. It happens at your age. Dad, you're repeating yourself again. We already discussed this twice. Dad, slow down and take your time. I know this is all very confusing for you. Each time she spoke to me like I was losing my mental faculties, she was performing for an invisible audience, training everyone to see me as declining. If you've ever been, talked down to by your own family, you understand the choice I faced every day. Fight back and prove I was difficult, or stay quiet and let them build their case against me. There's no winning move in that game. Helen had noticed these changes in those final weeks when the pain medication made her more observant, not less aware. Jennifer keeps treating you like you're already gone, she'd whispered from her hospital bed during one of our long nights together. Like she's managing your affairs instead of supporting your grief. She's worried about me. That's natural. Helen had squeezed my fingers with surprising strength for someone so close to dying. She's not worried about you. She's worried about what you might do with the money before she can control it. I'd dismissed it as pain medication talking. Helen was dying, scared, probably paranoid about our uncertain future. I should have listened to my dying wife's warnings about how our living daughter was redefining me. The life insurance payout was substantial. $500,000 from Helen's policy. The house was worth over $1 million in today's market. My retirement accounts held another $800,000 carefully saved. If I were declared incompetent, Jennifer would be appointed as my conservator with complete legal authority over all of it. This wasn't about protecting me from myself. This was about protecting my assets from my own autonomy. Jennifer's first witness was a doctor I'd never met before in my life. I evaluated him 3 weeks ago based on family concerns. He showed signs of cognitive impairment, memory problems, poor judgment, In my professional opinion, he needs supervised care. That's all she wanted the court to hear. Medical validation of family concerns. Margaret destroyed him efficiently in cross-examination. How long did you spend with him? 45 minutes. Had you examined him before? No. In those 45 minutes, did he know his name, address, and the current president? Yes. Did he balance his checkbook to the penny that month? I wasn't given financial records. Who paid for this evaluation? His daughter arranged payment. $1,500. The moment you realize someone bought an opinion. Jennifer's second witness was my neighbor, Mrs. Kim. I'm very concerned about him. Last month, I found him in his backyard at midnight in his robe. When I asked if everything was okay, he seemed confused about why I was worried. This was more damaging. Mrs. Kim genuinely cared and had no financial motive. Margaret asked careful questions. What was Mrs. Kim doing outside at midnight? Arthritis, insomnia. What exactly did I say? That I couldn't sleep, that the house felt empty. Did I recognize her immediately? Yes. Did I know where I was? Yes. My own property. Mrs. Kim, is midnight grief walking unusual for someone who recently lost their spouse of 43 years? When you put it that way, no, I suppose it's quite normal. Margaret had turned concern into character testimony, but I knew Jennifer had prepared for this moment much more carefully. Jennifer took the stand to testify on her own behalf against me. I could see the genuine fear in her eyes now, real terror about losing her house, her lifestyle, everything she'd built. She wasn't evil or malicious. She was desperate and financially drowning. 3 weeks ago, I found Dad trying to cook dinner. At 11 p.m., when I pointed out it was very late, he became angry and insisted I was wrong about the time. Has he missed important appointments? Multiple medical appointments. His doctor's office called me directly because he'd missed 2 appointments without calling to reschedule. Are you concerned about his ability to manage finances? Extremely concerned. Last month, he attempted to withdraw $20,000 in cash. When the bank questioned him, he became agitated and couldn't explain what the money was for. This was completely fabricated. I had no memory of any such incident. How has this affected your relationship? Jennifer's voice broke with perfect timing. Real tears formed on cue. It's devastating. This is my father, the man who taught me everything about responsibility. But I can't watch him make dangerous decisions that could destroy his future. Someone has to protect him from himself, even when he fights that protection every step of the way. She believed her own performance completely. That's what made it so convincing to everyone watching in the courtroom. Margaret stood for cross-examination with that look I was learning to recognize. You mentioned $20,000. Do you have documentation of this transaction? The bank has records. Did you request those records for this hearing? I assumed they'd be provided if needed. What was the bank manager's name who witnessed this concerning behavior? I don't recall exactly. I was very upset about Dad's condition. You're asking this court to remove your father's constitutional rights based on an incident you can't document, involving a person you can't name, at a bank that apparently has no record? I've been extremely stressed about his deteriorating condition. The doubt was planted, but I knew Jennifer had one more card to play. What Jennifer didn't know was that I'd been preparing since she filed those papers. Margaret and I discovered Jennifer's real situation. Her mortgage was 3 months behind. Her husband lost his job in May. The private school costs $23,000 a year. 6 months ago, Jennifer was laid off too. She'd been unemployed, hiding it from me, desperately looking for solutions. As conservator, she could access everything for my care, sell the house, charge fees. But our strongest evidence was about my actual competency. A neuropsychologist testified for our defense. I spent 3 hours evaluating him, full cognitive battery. He scored normally for his age and education, no signs of dementia or impairment. Does he need supervised care? Absolutely not. He's grieving, which is normal. Grief isn't incompetence. How does your evaluation compare to the previous one? 3 hours versus 45 minutes. Independent records versus family testimony. The contrast speaks for itself. Then I testified. I understand my daughter believes I can't care for myself. I understand she wants control of my affairs. I looked at Jennifer. Fear filled her eyes. I'm grieving. I miss my wife every day, but grief isn't incompetence. Margaret had me address Jennifer's allegations about that $20,000 withdrawal. Do you have any memory of it? None. I've never attempted to withdraw $20,000 from any bank. She presented my bank records. 6 months of normal transactions. No attempted withdrawals, no unusual activity. You missed medical appointments? I missed one appointment in August, called the same day to reschedule. The cooking incident? My wife cooked dinner at 6 p.m. for 43 years. After she died, normal mealtimes felt impossible. Sometimes I heated soup when grief wasn't overwhelming me. When Jennifer criticized this, I became defensive. Not confused, defensive. The courtroom fell silent. You forgot who raised you. I looked at Jennifer. You forgot I taught you about honesty. I'm grieving. But grief isn't grounds for removing someone's rights. Margaret picked up a single document that would end everything. I have one final piece of evidence. She handed me the paper that destroyed Jennifer's case. Can you identify this? A home equity loan application filed by my daughter using a forged power of attorney document. The judge froze, completely motionless, staring at the document like it contained explosives. Whispers erupted throughout the courtroom. Did you sign this power of attorney? Absolutely not. Did you authorize any loans against your property? No such authorization was ever given. The judge's voice turned to ice. Ma'am, approach the bench immediately. Jennifer stood on visibly shaking legs. Did you forge your father's signature on legal documents? I thought he'd signed it during one of his confused episodes. I thought he'd forgotten. You thought your father forgot signing away legal control of his property? I was trying to help our family survive financially. I thought he'd want to help us if he truly understood how desperate our situation had become. There it was. Complete confession wrapped in self-justification. The single document that destroyed her entire case. The judge reviewed all evidence in silence. Finally, she spoke. The evidence doesn't support incompetence. The evaluation shows normal cognitive function. The behavioral concerns appear to be grief, not decline. She looked at Jennifer. More concerning is evidence of attempted fraud. This suggests the petition was filed for financial gain, not genuine concern. The petition is denied. He retains all rights to his affairs. I'm referring the forgery to the prosecutor's office, Jennifer sobbed. I walked out without looking back. 3 months later, Jennifer pleaded guilty to attempted fraud charges, 18 months probation. The family quietly moved to Oregon to start over. I haven't seen my grandson since the hearing ended that day. She sent one letter from Portland several months later, asking for forgiveness. Dad, I know I destroyed everything between us completely. I was desperate and terrified, and I convinced myself I was helping both of us somehow. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I read it once and threw it away. Sometimes the people who claim to love you most deeply understand you least of all people. Sometimes protecting yourself means accepting that the family you thought you had never actually existed the way you believed. Helen's garden still blooms every spring without her. I tend it alone now, remembering her warnings I should have heeded. She knew people change when they smell money. Even our own children we raised with our own values. I'm still here in my own home, still free to make my own decisions, still making my own choices about my remaining life. If someone questions your competence after a major loss, trust your instincts immediately. Grief isn't incompetence. Healing isn't mental decline that requires intervention. They thought sorrow made me weak and easily controllable. It made me vigilant and prepared for their calculated manipulation. She once said I was declining rapidly and needed her immediate protection. Now she desperately needs protection from the devastating consequences of what she did.